Titanfall? Inconceivable. You keep using the word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Welcome to my first ever indie comic solicitations video. First things first, there are far too many publishers and comics for me to cover like I do DC and Marvel solicitations. I'm going to run down what I think are the most interesting books from several of the top indie publishers. This rundown includes books I read, comics that have intriguing creative teams or premises, and some that may even be controversial. If I don't cover your favorite indie comic, please let me know in the comments section. With the volume of great independent comics available, I'm bound to miss several good books. Also, if this is your first time viewing the channel, or if you're a regular and haven't yet subscribed, I ask that you please consider doing so. My subscriber count is a flag to other comic book fans that Thinking Critical YouTube is one of the go-to channels for comic book reviews, news, discussion, and in-depth analysis. With that, let's talk November's indie comic book solicitations. Image Comics is releasing 38 new comics, including 5 #1 issues. The biggest debut is without a doubt Scott Snyder and Charles Soule's Undiscovered Country. At first glance, it appears the story of a future America, walled off for 30 years, is social commentary about the modern-day political debate. But neither Snyder nor Soule have confirmed those suspicions marketing the book, so I'll take it at face value until proven otherwise. When a team seeking a cure for a global pandemic breaches U.S. borders, they quickly find themselves in a struggle to survive this strange and deadly lost continent. Image Comics is in need for a new hit series now that The Walking Dead ended and with Saga still on hiatus. Snyder and Soule's pedigree absolutely puts Undiscovered Country in the running for Image Comics' next It book. Issue 1 is a 44-page, double-sized issue and runs $4. The other new series from Image Comics I'm very interested in is Philadelphia. Not only does it have a catchy name, it features Spawn artist Jason Shawn Alexander. I'm not too familiar with writer Rodney Barnes, but he co-produced the first season of Marvel's Runaways. I've never heard anyone speak of the show, so I don't know if that's a good thing or if that's a bad thing. The story features a son returning to Philadelphia to bury his father when he discovers the city that was once the symbol of liberty and freedom has fallen prey to corruption, poverty, unemployment, brutality, and vampires. I definitely need to do some research on Rodney Barnes' work before dropping $4 on the comic, but it most certainly has my attention. Jeff Lemire's new series Family Tree also debuts in November from Image Comics. Criminal has steadily climbed the ranks of my personal favorite comic series since debuting earlier this year. Issue 10 promises the return of private detective Dan Faraday to the story. His introduction in issue 5 was my favorite of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' stories so far. If you haven't been reading Criminal, trust me, you are missing out on one of the best stories in all of fiction. That includes comic books, novels, movies, and TV. It's awesome. Kieran Gillen's Die continues to be one of the best fantasy comics on the market. Stephanie Hahn's artwork in Die may be the best in the entire industry. Mark Millar's outstanding miniseries Space Bandits wraps up its 5-issue run. The Space Revenge adventure comic is adapted from an upcoming Miller World Netflix series. Spawn has consistently been one of the great books in all of comics in 2019, heading to its milestone issues 300 and 301. The aforementioned Jason Shawn Alexander is back as a primary artist on issue 303, and the series once again sells for $3. Image Comics not be as hot as they were, say, 4 or 5 years ago, but with the decline at DC and Marvel being Marvel, they're more important now than ever. For those of you who don't know, Alterna Comics is my favorite publisher. Alterna features great stories at very reasonable prices, delivered on good old-fashioned newsprint. November is a bit of a light month for the publisher. They're only releasing 2 new books, The Adventures of Mr. Crypt and Baron Rat No. 3, and Gods and Gears No. 2. Both run a very affordable $1.50. The coolest thing they're delivering is the complete run of the Mighty Mascots in an 80-page giant for just $5. There is simply no better deal in the entire comic book industry unless you're pirating, and I certainly don't condone that behavior. Alterna is also releasing Feast or Famine and Scrimshaw Tears of the Sonoran Sea in trades for $10 each. If you find current prices for comics too high, I suggest checking out Alterna Comics' e-commerce site. They have a good-sized library of comics between $1 and $2 each, available right now. IDW releases 32 new comics, including 5 number ones. I have been waiting so long for a new Crow series worth buying to finally arrive. Tim Seeley writes the new Crow, Hark the Herald. I gotta say, I really dislike the subtitle. Also, Seeley is a really hit or miss writer for me, and his Crow / number 1 epically sucked. If anyone can give me a compelling reason to buy into Crow, Hark the Herald, please lay it on me. I really want to read this book. Former WWE Women's and Divas champ AJ Lee, aka AJ Mendez, joins her husband CM Punk in the ranks of comic book writers with a co-writing credit alongside Amy Garcia on Glow vs. the Babyface. Definitely not my cup of tea, but I can vouch she was one hell of a promo during her time as a WWE superstar. Another debut series I would like to buy is Dungeons & Dragons Infernal Tides. I'm a huge fantasy buff and love dragons and swords. Unfortunately, this series is fronted by Jim Zub. I have no other way to put this. I find his writing exceptionally boring and predictable. Rising Sun appears to have promise as well, but it's led by Ron Mars, who due to his rabid anti-consumer and political rhetoric is on my never buy list. The final debut issue of Star Trek Picard Countdown, a prequel to the upcoming CBS All Access series. Unfortunately, there is no preview cover available at this time. IDW's big issue is the $8 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 100, featuring the finale of the City at War story. TMNT is one of the consistently good indie books on the market, but I've been underwhelmed by City at War so far. I do have a ton of trust in Kevin Eastman and writer Tom Waltz. I fully expect them to pay off 8 years of excellent stories in exciting fashion for issue 100. Stan Sakai and Usagi Yojimbo are also celebrating a milestone in November. To celebrate its 35th anniversary, Sakai revisits the very Usagi story, The Goblin of Adachigahara, expanding it from 8 to 24 pages. Needless to say, this and TMNT 100 are must-buys in my book. Walt Simonson's sequel series, Ragnarok Breaking of Helheim, is also a fantastic book. Nobody in comics history tells Norse legend-based stories like Simonson, and that's not changing anytime soon. Kanto finishes up its 6-issue run. I'm personally in love with David Booher and Drew Zucker's tale of pint-sized Tin Man Kanto searching for his love's heart to save her. It's a great story and perfect for readers wanting to share their love of comics with their kids or other young family members. IDW is currently action-packed with financial issues, but they still publish a decent lineup of licensed and original titles. Boom Studios is dropping 20 new comics, including 4 number 1 issues. For lack of a better term, I find Boom to be extremely boom or bust for me, without many titles in the middle. The debut comic I'm most interested in is Matt Kent's Folklords. In my opinion, Kent is the most underrated writer in the industry. I'm also a sucker for fantasy comics. Folklords is marketed as a new series for fans of Die and Middle West, 2 of my favorite comics on the market today. Soule! Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel are releasing tie-ins to Boom's Hellmouth event. I'm honestly not much of a fan of the Buffy series despite really liking Jordi Belair. I am, however, really loving me some Angel from one of my favorite comic writers, Brian Hill. I never particularly liked the TV series, but this comic is much better in my opinion. Probably the best ongoing comics at Boom are Ryan Parrott's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Go-Go Power Rangers. The all-new Omega Ranger features heavily in both comics in November, and Mighty Morphin is also offering a foil variant cover for $5. Former Iceman writer Cena Grace is now co-writing the Go-Go series, so continue buying at your own risk. Grace is not exactly synonymous with quality writing. Dark Horse releases 26 comics and 4 number 1 issues. I keep waiting for Dark Horse to take their rightful place as the 4th biggest publisher behind Marvel, DC, and Image. They have a lot of cool licenses like Alien, Predator, and Game of Thrones, and franchises like Umbrella Academy. They also feature some of the best creative teams outside the big 2. Case in point, Jeff Lemire and Mike Deodato Jr.'s Berserker Unbound finishes its 4-issue run. Lemire also completes his Black Hammer Justice League Hammer of Justice miniseries in November. Matt Kent's third story in the Ether series, Ether: The Disappearance of Violet Bell, is definitely worth checking out. It's similar to Robert Kirkman's Oblivion Song, but with a fantasy setting. Industry legend Ann Nocenti releases her Ruby Falls under Vertigo visionary Karen Berger's Berger Books imprint. Just looking at the cover, it doesn't appear to be something I'm gonna buy, but it's guaranteed to have quality writing and execution. Hellboy creator Mike Mignola launches his Witchfinder: The Reign of Darkness 5-issue miniseries. The story features the reintroduction of American occult adventurer Sarah Jewell to the series. Formerly great Valiant Comics continues its trek into oblivion. Normally a new Rise series would have me geeking out over my favorite comic character, but after Dan Abnett's Fallen World got the characters so wrong, I have little hope for the series. Combine that with Juan Jose Rip, whose art I like, but is all wrong for this series, and I'm passing on my favorite character without a second thought. Just 18 months ago, Valiant titles were led by Jeff Lemire, Matt Kent, Christos Gage, and Andy Diggle. Following the sale of Valiant to a Chinese media company and the hiring of Heather Antos as a key talent evaluator and editor, Valiant Comics are now led by Vita Ayala, Cullen Bunn, B. Claymore, and Mags Visaggio. Quality talent Dan Abnett and OK Tim Seeley aren't enough to overcome a murderer's row of terrible writers. What a difference just over a year makes. Things couldn't be more depressing for my former favorite comic publisher. Dynamite releases 9 new comics and 1 #1 issue. They are putting almost all their eggs in the Vampirella basket. Not only are they releasing issue 5 of Christopher Priest, run on the series, they also release issues of Vengeance of Vampirella and Vampirella Red Sonja. They're also distributing new variant covers for issue 1 and issue 2 of Vampirella featuring Billy Tucci and Art Germ. Which makes sense seeing Vampirella #1 was the most ordered comic in Dynamite history. Ethan Sachs leads the Kiss Zombie series. I'm not terribly interested personally, but zombie books tend to move units for comics, so I'm sure this will be a decent hit by Dynamite's non-vampy standards. They're also trying to cash in on the well-regarded Robbie Williams Project Superpower series with Solo, Black Terror, and death-defying devil titles. Max Bemis, who holds permanent residence on my never buy list, promises to explore PTSD in Black Terror. Death-Defying Devil is fronted by Gail Simone, who hasn't had a hit book to speak of in several years. That wraps up my indie publisher coverage, but there are still 4 comic books I think you should know about. Vault Comics' Resonant is most definitely a diamond in the rough waiting to be discovered by more readers. I'd never heard of David Andry before, but this is a great take on Netflix's terrible Bird Box movie. Ahoy Comics' The Wrong Earth was one of the best comics of 2019 before artist Jamal Igle placed the series on a hiatus to work on Kwanzaa's certain-to-be-terrible White. Writer Tom Payer heard the audience is delivering a prequel series, Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man, with a new artist in the meantime. If you haven't read The Wrong Earth, it's fantastic. I can't, however, vouch for this new book yet. Antarctic Press has a couple of releases of note. Brian Ball and his Ragtag creative team are wrapping up their debut zombie PTSD series, Rags. If you're a fan of zombie action and strong female leads, former Marine Regina Rogowski is probably the lead character you've been waiting for. AP are also releasing the second issue of Chuck Dixon's Jungle Comics Revival. Readers looking for new comics with old school heart and soul, look no further than Jungle Comics. Friend of the pod, Tim Lim, releases most of his comics through Antarctic Press. If you've never read his 2-part Black Ops GI bunny-led action story, it receives my highest recommendation. Before we put a bow on November's indie comic book solicitations, let's all point and laugh at the worst of the worst comic covers you can find. Chelsea Kane's Man-Eaters doesn't drop any new issues, but the cover for the Volume 3 release was bad enough that I had to include it. I honestly don't understand how Image let this get through production. It's glitter and a kitten. Maybe this is subverting expectations. I personally have never heard of Brian Haberlein's Mark, and after seeing this Gerard Van Dyke cover, I can see why. This is the most generic tough girl cover ever. Why should anyone care about this woman other than her tattoos? Joshua Bertram's Transformers 15 cover is somehow even more boring. I'm sure this is important, but it certainly won't sell a single comic to a new reader. Finally, the worst cover in all of indie comics comes from Kate Leff's Spell on Wheels 2 number 2 from Dark Horse. I'm not sure who Megan Levins is, but she appears to be out of interesting ideas. This is Young Animal's Far Sector cover bad, in my opinion. November is going to be an interesting month for indie comic books. I predict Scott Snyder and Charles Soule's Undiscovered Country will be the big winner and have a huge debut for Image Comics. IDW's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 100 concludes a very successful 8-year run for this series and may include the return of a very important villain. $8 feels a bit steep, but at this point I'm pot committed to the story. Alterna Comics' $5 80-page The Mighty Mascots Giant is without a doubt the best deal in all of comics. Boom Studios' Buffy and Angel series are releasing tie-ins to the Hellmouth event. Jeff Lemire's Berserker Unbound and Black Hammer Justice League crossover finish at Dark Horse. Valiant Comics is a shell of its former self and shows no signs of life. Dynamite is all in on Vampirella for the foreseeable future. Don't forget to check out Rags, Jungle Comics, and Black Hops from Antarctic Press, as well as Vault Comics Resonant. If you have any indie comics recommendations or opinions on any of the books I covered, please hit me up in the comments. Look for a new comic review on the channel tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me for November's Indie Comic Book Solicitations. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.